It was an hour before the Indians paused again, and then they stopped so abruptly that prisoners were tripping over each other. It frightened Eben. What was going to happen? What dread plan might the Indians have for their white prisoners now? No Indian lifted a weapon. They stood motionless, looking west. Eben watched for several moments before he was able to pick out distant figures coming toward them. It was not rescue. If those were English, the Indians would long ago have surrounded and attacked them. Slowly the shapes turned into men carrying burdens, men bent double under the weight, yet not staggering as Eben had. They looked as if they had killed and were carrying entire cows. They were very close before Eben realized he was seeing warriors carrying their wounded. Each hurt man was rolled up into a package, swaddled like a baby in blankets, and strapped to a warrior's back. These men were carrying, by their foreheads and on their spines, a weight equal to their own. Caroline B. Cooney, The Ransom of Mercy Carter. Welcome back to the Well House Exorcist, and this is your ghost of a host with the most, Shanna.
It's Puckwa PJ.
Who's making a bong bong sound.
Bong.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Well, honey, how are you?
Exhausted, but I'm good.
Having a day?
I'm having a day.
Okay. Do you want to talk about it?
I mean, sometimes you just have to replace a faucet because the entire spigot falls off of the rest of the faucet. And then you can't replace the faucet because you don't have the tools or the ability to reach the stinking bolts to unscrew it.
That's why you pay somebody.
Yep.
I said that yesterday.
Didn't want to pay somebody.
I know. But our last name is?
Yeah.
There you go.
I know.
All right. So why are we here tonight?
To record a podcast.
What?
I know, right?
I wasn't invited. We are here to do a follow-up for the Para-Sabrina Bigley interview.
Yeah.
And discuss the Plum Tree Massacre.
Yeah, we were very intrigued by this because we had never heard of it before.
Yeah, because
we knew of the Wyoming Valley Massacre. That one's easy. You know, like that.
Well, that's our area, too.
Yeah.
Plum Creek is further away from us, so that's kind of why. I actually included the Wyoming Valley Massacre in my script tonight.
Ooh.
You're welcome. So tonight we are going to discuss the Plum Tree Massacre and the haunting of Jodi Hill's house. The haunting of Hill House, if you will.
Ha!
See what I did there. My references for this evening will be the Williamsport Sun-Gazette, the Pennsylvania Rambler, North Central Chapter 8 Society for Pennsylvania Archaeology, and the Revolutionary War Journal.
I watched a TV show.
Yes, you did. The Dead Files of our last reference. All right, so what is the Plum Tree Massacre?
I don't know.
I know you don't.
It's a massacre.
That's why I'm here.
Around the plum tree?
Yeah.
One tree. One singular tree.
Not singular tree, which is contrary to popular opinion.
Is it a plum tree? Are there plum trees?
There are wild plums in this.
Okay.
Thank goodness.
Are they still there? Can I eat them?
No, they're no longer there.
Dang it.
So, and I wouldn't suggest eating them because there's a cemetery where they once were. You probably don't want to eat them. Anyway, the Plum Tree Massacre. I want to give you a little bit of a backdrop here. A group of pioneers were ambushed in a violent attack amidst the boughs and thickets of wild plums, according to the Williamsport Sun-Gazette. This area is what is now known as West 4th and Cemetery Streets. While we call it the Plum Tree Massacre, it's also known as the Plum Thicket Massacre, which I think is better because the thicket implies more than one tree. It is among one of the bloodiest moments in the early history of Pennsylvania. The settlers living in what is present-day Lycoming County were fighting for their lives against an enemy whose entire plan of attack was composed of ambushes and lightning raids designed to elicit as much terror and destruction as possible. The Plum Tree Massacre was one of 3 separate attacks in the area, and it was by far the bloodiest. All 3 raids were within 5 miles of each other, and there were more possible victims, as several bodies were never found nor heard of again. Some were taken captive with reports of torture, and one African American was burned at the stake. This Plum Tree Massacre would be the precursor to the Great Wyoming Valley Massacre of July 3rd through 4th, 1778, This raid, 50 miles east on the north side of the Susquehanna River, resulted in the killing of just over 300 Continental troops and settlers. Over 100 people were taken prisoner, spending years in captivity.
Wow. Years.
Yes. Isn't that a happy backdrop?
So happy.
You feeling it in your soul?
One of my former students lives on Cemetery Road.
Yes. Nice and creepy. Doo, doo, doo. So,
Well, Cemetery Road, is it road or street? It may not be the same.
Not the same.
Okay,
No.
not the same.
West 4th and Cemetery Streets.
Okay.
Yes. So that person over there is good. They can eat their wild plums. Okay. They can find any.
If they have any.
If they have any. So with that being said, we know a lot about the Wyoming Valley Massacre because you had to do a big presentation on it for our bicentennial or whatever it was here in our town. But so this is further out where we work. And actually they mention some of the locations where like the Lycoming Mall now is.
Huh.
So in some of the readings, I was like, I know where that is. I know where that is. I kept that out of the script just because anybody not from the area is going to be like, whatever that is. Like Jackie on California. So I kept it out of here. But it is, right where we work, which is kind of crazy to think about. So do you remember what happened from the TV show?
Oh, I'm like, you just told me.
That was it. Cake night. See you guys. See you next week.
That just people were scalped, killed, women, children, men, and it happens like in the blink of an eye. Like people had no idea what the heck was happening.
Yeah.
When it started. And yeah, people like hid in their houses and tried to do whatever they could to escape it.
Well, that was just in general for the Wyoming Valley Massacre. But for this one, they couldn't get into a house because they're in the middle of nowhere. They were in trouble. They was in the trouble. So at dusk on June 10th, 1778, a wagon load of pioneers were viciously attacked. The Native Americans fired 2 guns, then 3, and then they left their place of concealment to surround the wagon. People escaped as fast as they could, and those who did flee could see the carnage from the distance. They saw the Native Americans attacking women and children with tomahawks. So that just kind of hurts to know that men ran away and left ladies and children to defend for themselves. We'll get into that.
Well,
No, I don't know. Why don't you explain to me why you would leave us?
They went to get some milk and never came back.
Oh my gosh. No. This is supposed to be a spooky podcast. All right, so who was in the wagon train?
Men and women and children.
Yes, but they have names.
Oh,
Peter Smith.
Good for them.
Just because you had a bad day. Now, I want you to remember the name Peter Smith, though, okay? We don't like him.
Okay.
So Peter Smith and his entire family, which included his wife and 6 children. There were also 5 men from Captain Reynolds' company. So there's Michael Smith and Michael Campbell. 2 different Michaels.
Michael Scott?
No Michael Scott, though, sorry. David Chambers and 2 men whose last names we know were Snodgrass and Hammond. We don't have first names.
Was what?
Snodgrass.
Okay.
And Hammond.
Snod with a D.
Yes, not Snodgrass. Snodgrass. And Hammond, but not Hammond and Jurassic Park. Sorry, not that one. And we don't know their first names, and we don't know much about them.
Well, I'm going to call him John Hammond.
Okay. That's not confusing. Anyway, also
From
in the
Jurassic
wagon.
Park.
I know. Also in the wagon train were Rachel King and her 2 children, Sarah and Ruth, who were 4 years old and 2 years old. So little pipsqueaks. Now, Rachel and her 2 children had been safely ensconced at Fort Muncie, but they were talked into coming along with Peter Smith to get to the new settlers' fort along Lycoming Creek, where her husband William King was, along with Robert Covenhoven and James Armstrong. So she didn't want to go because she was safe in Fort Muncie, but Peter's like, come on, your husband's building this new place up there, you can come on with us, come on. No need for him to come back on different trips, come on, let's go. She did not want to go, but she was finally convinced because it would save her husband an extra trip. Obviously, it was an ill-chosen decision.
Wow. Yeah, bad luck.
Yeah.
That's not good.
And it's because of Peter Smith that she actually goes. So again, we don't like him.
Petey.
Yeah, Petey. So just a background then, because we mentioned some treaties in the past, but our listeners who are not from this area will have absolutely no idea what we're talking about.
Oh.
Okay.
Is this the treaty?
This is one of the treaties, yes. So there was a treaty called the Treaty of Fort Stanwix in 1768, and that's where the Iroquois sold the land east of Lycoming Creek to the English. So they did this as a desperate attempt to take the pressure off of the incursions of settlers who were kind of hopping onto the Sioux Nation's land, especially in upstate New York. So they said, fine, you can have this land up into this creek. That's yours now. Please don't go beyond that boundary line.
Mm-hmm.
Now, while the province of Pennsylvania threatened fines and imprisonment for anyone making, quote, improvements, which is kind of funny to say, ways of, farming and building.
Yep.
Making improvements on Iroquois land, settlers were moving in still. They were farming, building, you name it. So despite these actions, like the British Proclamation of 1763, which forbade settling west of the Appalachians, all East Coast Native American nations, like the Cherokee, were experiencing the same invasion of their lands, which is what William King and his group were doing. They were illegally building homes and forts in this area.
Doing white people things.
Oh my. Again, this is a podcast. Anyway, and what would become Jaysburg in the future, William King, Robert Covenhoven, and James Armstrong began to build this settlers' fort. Their reasoning was they believed the creek mentioned in the treaty was actually Pine Creek, not Lycoming Creek.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so that was their excuse. No wonder the Native Americans were angry.
You all should put signs up saying what creek is what.
Yeah, well, because in their treaty, they used their native language for the creek they were talking about. And so they go, I don't know what that creek is. You meant Pine Creek. Yeah.
Yep.
Ugh, anyway.
We had no idea.
So surprised.
If only we had someone to translate.
Because there are a lot.
As we write this treaty for you.
Oh, boy. Anyway, the sun was setting as the wagons made it to Loyalsock Creek. So there you go.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, right close to Lycoming. When they got there, they met John Harris. He told them that he had heard sounds of gunfire all along Lycoming Creek, and he advised them to head right back to Fort Muncie for safety. So they get lucky. Yeah, they stop at Loyalsock Creek, and this guy, John's like, I heard gun stuff. Go on back to the fort. It is not safe here. There's many Native Americans attacking. Well, instead of taking heed, Peter Smith decided to continue toward Lycoming Creek.
Dang it, Petey.
I know. While Harris continued to the fort to make a report about what he had heard. He's like, hey, well, you go on. I'm going to go back to the fort. Bye. Anyway. Yeah, Petey, the commanding officer, when hearing about the gunfire, sent 15 men to find Peter Smith and his party and to bring them back to the safety of the fort. However, it was already too late to save them. Smith's party was only about half a mile from the new settlers' fort, so they're that close, half a mile to where William King was, when the Native Americans ambushed them from the thicket of wild plums. As soon as the wagons headed into the thicket, they were attacked. Because not just was this a thicket of plums, added to it were piles of branches from the same plum trees that settlers had chopped down and then piled up to make a widened path to accommodate their wagons. So they made it better for the Native Americans to have a perfect place to ambush them. Ouch.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, during the first volley, Snodgrass, not Snotgrass, was killed instantly by a bullet lodging into his head. Yeah. The soldiers did return fire from behind trees, so they hopped off the wagon and got behind trees for a little bit of cover and started firing back. 2 children, 1 boy and 1 girl, ran into the underbrush to escape. As Native Americans surrounded the settlers, the men ran off and abandoned the wagons, the women, and the children, leaving them to fend for themselves. Only one man, Michael Campbell, stayed and fought to save them, but he was soon overtaken by the Native Americans. He fought in brutal hand-to-hand combat with the Native Americans until he was overwhelmed. And we know that hand-to-hand combat with Native Americans was pretty rough.
Yeah. Also a dumb idea, probably, for a settler to go against a Native American.
Well, but I give him props because he stayed to protect the women and children.
I'm just saying,
and their guns.
Don't expect to win that fight.
Nope, not at all. This attack defined men's courage to either stand and fight or run to seek self-preservation at all costs. So this actually became the first fight where people started saying, run for your lives, don't stay and fight, Peter Smith ran when the raiders attacked. Cowardly, obviously, leaving his family to be butchered. So I have my own feelings about Peter Smith because he's like, bye, Felicia, and leaves them all there to die as he runs away.
Just took the saying literally, every man for himself.
Yeah. Fun fact. In later occurrences...
Is this a fun fact?
Well, to make us. I know we use that a lot. So it just shows how much we're going to hate Petey here. In later occurrences after the Plum Tree Massacre, Peter Smith is mentioned twice during other Native American attacks.
Oh, jeez.
Do you think they're positive?
Absolutely.
So he survived the Plum Tree Massacre to be immortalized in history as being a coward 2 more times. In one instance, in early 1779, so a year later, Peter Smith enlisted the aid of 6 or 7 men to help him in cutting his oats a mile below Jaysburg in Turkey Run, so the same area where his family had just been killed a year prior. While the men were reaping the oats, a musket exploded, striking James Brady. A Native American ran up and scalped him while he was alive, which was very common. Peter Smith, instead of grabbing his gun, which was beside him, and saving his friend, instead of boom, he just ran for safety. James's friends came out and found him still alive, and they took him back to his dad's house, where he died 5 days later. In the second story that Peter Smith is in...
That's just one story.
Yeah, it's one. He was traveling to the fort when Captain John Brady came upon him. Now, this is the dad of James, the man who was scalped. Okay? Just put that in there. Within a quarter mile of their destination, shots were fired in an ambush. Brady was hit and fell from his horse. As the horse raced past Peter Smith, he grabbed it and mounted it. He then raced to the fort for safety. When armed men headed back to help the captain, it was too late. He was scalped and left for dead. At the fort, Captain Brady's wife recognized her husband's horse, and she's like, sorry, how'd you get that? He told her, and this is a quote, Captain Brady was in heaven or hell or on his way to Tioga, i.e. the major village of the Seneca Nation, the Iroquois. If they took you captive, they took you there.
Yeah. Up northern PA, for people who don't know. We're like right on New York border.
Yeah, New York border. So Peter Smith was a huge coward, and I hate him.
Yeah. For all the history buffs out there, we could call him the Pennsylvania Ephialtes.
Yes, we could.
The guy who betrayed the 300 Spartans.
Oh, right, sorry. For people who don't know.
For the listeners.
Yes. And in the comic book, he looks so good.
Yeah. The comic book gets, and the movie 300 gets a lot of hate for its visual representation, but it's all symbolic. Mm-hmm. Which, when you realize that, it's like, okay, I get why things look the way they do and stuff like that, but...
Oh, I love it. They get the Spartan culture so perfect, all of it.
And the battle formations they make, and so much of it. So much of it, surprisingly, is pretty darn accurate.
Well, this is just me, I can't remember, when that one guy loses an eye, he says, well, God saw fit to give me a spare. Isn't that true? Isn't that part of the story?
They were trained the moment that they were conscripted into the Spartan lifestyle and raised in the barracks and everything. They were trained to be extremely witty.
Yeah. But isn't it true that a guy lost his eye, though? And
I don't know.
I think that's actually, he lost an eye, but he kept fighting.
I know. Oh, yeah, I'm sure. And a lot of the witty things they say in that are 100% like quotes from the texts, like our arrows will blot out the sun, and Leonidas replies, we'll fight in the shade.
Yeah,
that's an exact quote from people who wrote about it at the time. So they are very witty.
They were trained to, because wit was one way to disarm really your enemy, which
and
is
the
true.
whole not wearing armor is kind of true. They would dance onto the battlefield naked to, again, just mentally intimidate their foes.
Listen, if I had a body like that, I'd be flaunting it too. I would sit down, eat some popcorn, and watch them fight. I got no problem with that. Anyway, moving on. I love you. So...
History moment over.
Not that I have explained how much I absolutely despise Peter Smith. So, again, he leaves his family there too. So let's go back to the massacre now. He leaves his family there to be massacred and butchered apart. Mm-hmm. So as that was happening, the group of 15 soldiers that were sent from Fort Muncie, they encountered the boy and the girl who had escaped. Due to his fear, the boy could not fully explain where the massacre was happening, and therefore the soldiers went the wrong way, near the west branch of the Susquehanna, not Lycoming Creek, or anywhere near the Plum Grove, unfortunately. By the time they figured out their mistake, the sun was already down, and the damage had already been done. They stumbled upon 2 bodies, but unable to see anything in the dark. They returned to Fort Muncie to come back in the morning. In another variation of historical documents, noted in 2 of my documents, so I think this is probably the more true version, they pressed on to Jaysburg and came back in the morning with William King.
Okay.
So one story, they go back to their fort and they go in the morning and then he meets up with them there. But in 2 different accounts that I read, they went on to Jaysburg, to the settlers' fort, and they came back at first light with William King. Regardless, when they returned at first light, they found the bodies of the 2 soldiers once again, so knew they're in the right area. They were Snodgrass and Campbell. Remember, Campbell had stayed to fight.
Yeah.
Snodgrass's body had been mutilated. So remember, he'd been shot in the head and died instantly. Then they mutilated his body, which was not uncommon by the Native Americans back then. They wanted to scare you.
Yeah. I mean, best way to protect their land is to try to keep people from
Yeah.
ever going back into it.
You think we're native? Well, we'll show you how native we are. Yeah. They began to search the plum thicket. They were met with more horrors. The wife of Peter Smith was found shot through the body, stabbed, and scalped. The children who could not get away were found dead. A girl and a boy were killed and scalped, for example. The boy who had escaped reported that when he ran and hid with his sister, he had heard Rachel King scream, and she was saying she would not be taken. He insisted then that Rachel must be somewhere near. When the Native Americans tried to drag her away, she fought. They found her a short time later near a small stream. Rachel King was found to have been tomahawked and scalped, but she was still alive. She sat up, and as her husband approached, she seemed to recognize him. This must have been a horrible surprise, as William King had no idea his wife and 2 girls were even a part of the party. Remember, in this one storyline, they go up to his seller's place and bring him back first light, and they haven't told him, hey, by the way, your wife and kids were in this wagon.
Yeah.
So he is completely surprised.
Yeah.
So he rushes to her. He holds her in his arms. She leans on him and she dies. According to the John Meganus of Lycoming County, he's a historian, it is quoted that Rachel had, quote, rested with her hand under her head, with her brains oozing over her fingers. Remember, she was scalped. King would then spend years looking for his 2 daughters, who were stolen by the Native Americans. 2 Smith children were never found.
That's one heck of a scalping. Like, everything I always heard about scalping was like the skin. They never cut through the skull like that.
Well, and it depends on how they pop it, because there's stories of when they do their cut to the front and to the sides and they pull back.
Yeah.
I think there were, was it Mr. Oh no, you weren't in Mr. Cooper's class because you weren't in school yet. You were at your Christian school, the Catholic school. Yeah. In 5th grade, he went into a lot of detail, and like they actually have stories of like the sound, of the scalp being pulled off, and sometimes people did not have like their skulls attached. Yeah, later they did, and people did survive scalpings. If the skin would grow back. There are stories of that too, but yeah. So yum. Yeah,
something I would like our historians to answer. Email us if you know, or maybe you know, is like the body like scalping. We know was a common practice among enemies, and for many Native American tribes. But the whole body mutilation thing and stuff like that, is that something they strictly did to try to prevent further colonization, or was that also common practice? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, and because they're supposed to be peaceful people.
Exactly. So, like, I could see them just taking these extreme measures just to try to stop the settlers from pushing further.
Horror.
Yeah.
Well, it does work, fun fact, because after these 3 ambushes, people ran away. It was called the Great Runaway, I believe, or the Big Runaway.
Yeah.
So they hopped in their boats and they went right back.
Yeah. And you could see, like, they'd be like, finally, like, we figured something out. Like, how long is it going to last, though? But...
Well, in any case, 2 of Smith's children are never found. Okay, so we have 2 that run away, 2 that are killed, and then 2 that are just gone. So they're either taken prisoner or killed later. We don't know, but there is no more history of them. So he effectively loses his entire family.
Wow.
I mean, he has the 2 kids left that are now horrified because they watched their mother's mother and, of course, their friend's mother get killed in front of them. So... So anyway, the end result of this massacre was 8 dead and 4 survivors, with William King's 2 daughters missing. Peter Smith's wife and 4 of his 6 children were among the dead. His actions directly resulted in that, had he listened to Harris, everyone could have survived and been safe. The bodies of all were collected and buried right where they had fallen, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And this is most likely why the cemetery was created there later, hence this being 4th Street and Cemetery Street. Yep. As for William King's lost daughters, they were later found alive in Canada and recovered after the war. So, different accounts, some say 5 years, some say 7 years. Regardless, he learned that they both had witnessed their mother being tomahawked, so they got to see that at the ages of 2 and 4. They had been taken to Tioga. The 2-year-old Ruth was carried north to Canada by a squaw and sold to an Englishwoman who apparently couldn't have children. She was still with that family when William found her and identified her. They all came back to Pennsylvania to live out their days. Sarah had been adopted into the Iroquois family, but was returned to Fort Niagara to reunite with her father. Ruth would go on to marry and move to New York to live out her days in comfort. However, Sarah remained with her father until he died in Jaysburg in 1802. He was then buried near the grave of Rachel, his first wife, even though he had remarried. Sarah lived with her half-brother then on a farm close to the Plum Thicket where her mother was killed, and she died in Williamsport in 1850. So right before the Civil War.
Okay.
So they do have, about 50 years together, which is nice. Well, she with her half-brother, and of course she gets a couple years with her dad before he passes away.
So for people currently living in Williamsport, because I was looking this up, it's right where the pajama factory is.
Real? So is there a cemetery still there?
Yeah, the Mount Carmel Cemetery.
Mount Carmel Cemetery in Williamsport.
Uh-huh.
Now I'm very confused. Okay.
And right behind it is Mound Cemetery.
Oh. Okay.
But yeah, it's Cemetery Street is literally one street south of Rose Street, which is what we take to get to the pajama factory.
Okay, so everyone, please don't go over there and try to graffiti or do satanic rituals. Okay? So anyway, we discussed all that because that is our backdrop then to the actual haunting that Para-Sabrina was a part of that made the Dead Files. Now, of course, her book, Haunted Freedom, is not about the Jodi Hill case at all. No. It's about her own personal story on Freedom Road. But the Jodi Hill story is just...
terrifying.
Yeah, horrifying.
Oh my gosh.
And I thought it was a good connection then to what we read last week. So the haunting, Jodi Hill. She was constantly being harassed, frightened, and attacked by a spirit or spirits, ? Yeah. Even with the help of Para-Sabrina and the travel channels The Dead Files, the paranormal just wouldn't stop. Jodi Hill lived on Memorial Avenue in Williamsport. She moved there in 2004. She says she got a weird vibe as soon as she set foot in the house. She did not want to live there at all. She didn't want to buy the house. She did not want it. Add to this was the fact that she spent a lot of her time alone since her husband worked long hours. So in total, she was terrorized in that house for 3 years. Yeah, we were in college when she finally moved out. So how did it begin? Like every other haunting, she started with hearing some sounds, including footsteps in other rooms, some weird smells. She told herself that the sounds of footsteps and other sounds were just people walking by the house outside because it's Williamsport, it's busy. So she knew she was lying to herself, but it helped her sleep at night. Then she began to be touched daily. She also saw shadows. Soon, she felt like she was never alone, even to the point that when she got in the shower, she felt like someone had just climbed in there with her. She could feel
in the back of the shower, yeah.
Isn't that awful? Like, oh, let me get in behind you.
I hate that.
I know.
So much. I always have this, it started with, this nightmare of me in the shower and someone just running in and, tackling me while I'm in the shower. And, how creepy it would be to just, turn and look and see, a figure just rushing at you through the shower curtain, and, just the idea of something being, behind you in there.
I think,
be terrible.
You'll just hear the wee, wee, wee. Because why not have Psycho in there? Classical movies, of course, make us scared. But that I hate sharing a shower. I want to be in there by myself. I just hate sharing anything. As if that's my alone time. And I too have felt like someone's in the shower with me when I'm supposed to be alone. But I turn around and it's our freaking cat. Yeah. Toby there, getting hit in the face with water. Oh, Toby. He's a Maine Coon for our listeners, so he loves water. But now Binks has been doing it, but Binks is not like water. So he's like, oh, I hate this. And he runs away.
Now that we're off on a tangent, for our listeners, you may not have heard of Williamsport, but you have definitely heard of its most famous contribution to the world, which is Little League Baseball.
Mm-hmm.
Started in Williamsport.
Yep.
So that's that we're talking about that city when we talk about Williamsport. It's in terms of cities, it's small, but it's still a city in Pennsylvania.
And beautiful artwork and stuff downtown too.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm currently on a billboard, an electronic one with Alex.
I know. I can't believe they put it back up. That's great.
I'm popular again. So anyway, back to Jodi and the haunting, because this is supposed to be a scary podcast, PJ.
Is it?
She refused, like me, to spend much time in the basement. Just like me, she only went down there to do the laundry. I feel her in my soul. The reason why? She would hear hammers and wood being moved, like someone was working on a house or something down there. Even more, she once saw a Native American sitting on top of like a pipe in the basement. She saw him clearly because he was wearing brown pants and he had white feathers in his hair. Like she could describe him down to a T. Now, her husband also witnessed things, especially in the living room. He said that he saw a man sitting in the living room beside his wife.
On the armrest of a chair. Yeah.
Yep.
You turned the TV off, and then the reflection of the TV was this guy.
Sitting there.
And he said he didn't look happy at all.
And Jodi, before that, had seen a man in her living room in work boots walking around, and he was like just a dark figure, like a dark shadow of a man. But then her husband sees this reflection in the TV. He looks back in, and like he's not there on the chair, but like in the reflection he is. And he noted that what he saw was a person that was wearing like a farmer's hat. And again, as you said, not happy to be there.
Yeah.
So the farmer's hat is important, actually, for later. So trying to find answers, Jodi met with Para-Sabrina, Sabrina Beakley, and her group of paranormal investigators. Sabrina happened to be one of her actual friends, so she knew that she'd get some help. Now from this, she learned much, but was unable to ignore the strange experiences because the entity moved on to more scary interactions. So it moved on to physical assault, which we kind of mentioned in passing in our last podcast. Mm-hmm. After meeting with Sabrina, the entity pinned her down and sexually assaulted her for over an hour and a half. She was fully clothed the entire time, but she could not move. She immediately called Sabrina again. Sabrina was concerned and still believes to this day that the entity must have connected with her and followed her from a case in Mount Carmel, and then immediately attached itself to Jodi during that first meeting because it sensed in her an easy victim. Which is sad because Sabrina had said even in her interview that the stories were eerily similar and Jodi knew nothing about that Mount Carmel case. Now in the TV show, in the master bedroom, Jodi noted that she feels most scared there. She said that she would close the door and turn off the light and then like almost immediately be attacked in the room, or she'd be afraid to be attacked. Mm-hmm. She said it would seem that someone was trying to wake her up in a sexual way, provocatively. She would be held down and attacked constantly. She believes it stems from when she was attacked at the age of 12 because she says in the episode that she was attacked when she was 12. So she says, I know this would make me a good victim for this entity. When the attack happened and she told her husband, he actually ran around the house angry. He told it, like, stop attacking my wife.
Come after me instead. Show yourself. Things like that.
Yeah. You don't ever do that. Don't talk to it. But what happens is he wakes up with bruises on his lower back. So at that moment, he knew that something otherworldly was going on and that it wasn't safe to be there. But they continue to live there, and I think that's something we got angry about within the TV show too, was the husband, because he even had like his own place, like in the garage, right?
Yeah, he had a little man cave that he just escaped to all the time.
Like he works long hours and then I'm not going to be in the house with you, honey. Bye. Sorry you're having a bad time.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And she it's no secret that she was afraid to be alone in the house. You know, he knew about this and still would just not.
Yeah. Ugh. However, even with the paranormal investigators' help, Jodi still experienced activity. She would still hear footsteps. She also saw and felt other forces in the house. Now, according to the Dead Files episode, she had seen dark figures throughout the house. Most notable, in fact, was when Amy Allen, she's the medium for Dead Files, she actually saw a spirit of a farmer in front of the house. And he said that a female Native American was the reason for all the activity toward Jodi Hill. So I find that interesting because there are a lot of farmers, of course, in that time period.
Yeah.
It could have been Peter Smith. Just saying, no. But then, of course, the husband sees a man like in this like farmer's hat sitting close to Jodi. So, in any case, I said, like, when it came to the female Native American causing all the activity, it's not true because, as Amy Allen stated, this entity, she could tell, could take many forms. So she believed the entity pretended to be a farmer to lure her into a sense of safety.
Yeah.
But she never felt like she just knew from the get-go this thing is not a good thing to talk to.
Yeah. And the neat thing for those who haven't seen the Dead Files, the premise of it is there are two hosts, a man, Steve, and Amy, the medium. And Steve will go in first.
Yeah, he was a former Marine and a police
and
officer.
He's a demonologist.
Yeah.
And he'll go in first, interview the people, take down any pictures, anything that can identify them. And then that night, Amy will go through without talking to anyone and get like her...
Just the person recording her.
Yeah, and get her own... real quick, they put this dumb filter on the screen whenever like it's her time. And it's the cheapest, chintziest looking thing, and I hate it so much.
It was recorded in 2004 to 2007 time period, so like...
I know, but that still doesn't mean they should have put a filter on.
It's
they
funny,
could just
it didn't bother me until you mentioned it, and then it started bothering me. It's all your fault that I can't enjoy this show anymore.
I mean, so I do want to keep watching, because like I love the premise, and I think that these two are legit, you know?
It adds validity.
And I like that, to quote Sabrina from last week, they're not just looking for ghost Easter eggs, you know? They're actually like providing solutions. Where ghost hunters and all those people, they're like, oh yeah, it's haunted, bye. And they don't give any hints or help, you know? These people actually give options of like, here's what you should do next. If that doesn't work, then move on to this. So I do like the purpose of the show and everything. I hope that in later seasons, they kind of fix some of the production quality.
Oh my gosh, gotta stop. Well, anyways,
so what I was saying is, like, it's interesting how Amy, without having any knowledge of the property, was able to get these images and, you know, see the same things that she was hearing, or that Steve was hearing about from Jodi.
Well, I liked her confusing. She's like, she almost has Native American features? Like, she was confused. But anyway, according to the Dead Files episode, the Native American male that was seen in the basement could be Chief Corn Planter, which is like their way to translate his language. But he was a war chief of the Seneca tribe. So according to many accounts, Chief Corn Planter didn't want to fight, but he loved his people. So torn, he held everything to a vote. The majority ruled, so he went along with all the attacks. So he's a very peaceful person, but his people told him to,
And again, like I was saying earlier, like desperation can make you do some things. And who knows, maybe that's what, you know, that's why he was, you know, had that reputation in the end.
Yeah. And well, since the British gave them guns, they were able to attack ambush style. So Amy saw him in the basement as well, and she sensed that he felt guilty, actually, which she mentions in the episode. He told her his people worshipped whatever the monster entity was, and that they had to do things for this devil or it would do terrible things. So she had this combination where she notices him and he feels guilty for whatever he had done in the past, but also there's a connection to this demon thing that's in the house. Now, in another interesting moment when they're outside, Amy says she hears lots of gunfire. She sees someone hiding. It's a male and he's scared. And she hears all this gunfire, all these screams. Women were screaming and running in her vision. Men were yelling and shooting at each other. So she had just envisioned the massacre, most likely the Plum Tree Massacre, but had no idea. Because again, she has no knowledge of the background of where she is. Now, she also learned much about the female Native American. This squaw had a lot of anger. She didn't want to hurt anyone, but she believed that white people needed to learn a lesson. And most notably, she believed they deserved what happened to them. So she got that feeling from that Native American that she's like, I don't want to do this, but they deserve it. So again, it kind of fits that concept, like, how do we keep our land?
Yeah.
She also noticed that this Native American woman followed Jodi around all the time. She even saw this squaw following her into the shower, which again, she mentioned before she ever met Jodi. So she had no idea that was a thing.
And when she talks to Jodi, she's like, you have to know that she's there. Like, you must feel it.
Interestingly, the squaw told Amy that the evil entity had been in this area for a very long time. So this spirit knew that.
Yeah.
So again, like a kind of a cool connection. Well, not cool, but yeah, it's still cool. But anyway, Amy then focuses on the evil spirit. She said that while talking to the entity, she found out that it likes to torture and torment people. It also becomes heightened when people provoke it, when they start questioning it or agitating it. It also told Amy that it had killed and taken souls already. It also stated that its focus was on Jodi, and that this thing said it was a part of Jodi now, and Jodi was a part of it. And so that actually is kind of scary, because when I was reading the Sun Gazette interview, during an interview, Jodi told the people from the Sun Gazette that she actually had a dream prior to the Dead Files, and she heard something telling her, I'm a part of you and you are a part of me. So she had never told anyone that, including her husband, because he's out in his, garage manhole. But when she heard that phrase from Amy, she actually started sobbing. It scared her so bad. But it was also vindicating, she said, because she had felt crazy during all of this.
Yeah.
No one was listening to her, all her family thought she was crazy. So to have someone state something so similar to her dream made her feel a little less crazy, Now, Amy, of course, as you mentioned, she really does a close inspection of this demon. She does see him in his real form, even though, as I mentioned earlier, she got the sense he takes on many forms.
Mm-hmm.
So she saw something that she called a classic double. It had long claws and little horns, and it wanted to kill. She also said that she felt like it was a trickster, a liar, a manipulator. He even laughed over killing people. And when she's talking, I noticed this. She went from talking about it as an it to a he. She got that distinct impression that was male. So he even laughed over killing people. Amy learned he liked scratching his nails on walls and moving doors because it just elicited fear in people. She also noticed that he would do inappropriate, traumatizing things to Jodi. And she said that in her one vision, she saw him grabbing and licking Jodi, which is, I'm sorry, just ugh. She also learned that the entity had found Jodi's secret, and he was attacking her with the secret. Now, at this point, Amy wasn't really sure what that was, but she deduced it probably was sexual or an assault kind of thing there. She also believed that he was hiding in the closet. So she had a friend kind of sketch the demon that came out of the closet, and you saw this picture. I hope we can post it to our Facebook.
Yeah, we will. Yeah.
And the way she describes it made me think of American Horror in a way, because it's just like this black thing, and it has a shiny skin to it, which it makes you freak out. But it has these claws for hands. It has tiny horns. Now in front of the closet door, she kind of sees a female. She doesn't know the person's name is Jodi, but she sees this female who's very angry, and she's shouting at this demon. And so the image then that is created,
interestingly enough, with curly hair too.
Yeah, short curly hair, which is what Jodi has.
Yeah.
So I found that to me it was just really, validating to watch.
Yeah.
But it's also a TV show, so could they be cutting and pasting? Maybe. But in any case, when the picture is pulled out of the envelope, Steve, the other investigator, he actually says, "Oh bleep." So you can tell that this is not staged. This is the first time he's seeing this picture. And when they put it in front of Jodi, she starts sobbing uncontrollably, and her husband actually gasps. So
yeah, and he starts crying too.
Yeah, not a happy picture, that's for sure.
No.
So anyway, because of all that, Amy did research the entity through the lens of Native American research, and she came across a lot of variations of what it could be. So in different Native American lore, they called it the trickster, the clown, or the heyoke, which is a fun word to say. But according to all information, this entity was possibly once human, but it could also be half man, half spirit. So the idea is that it was once human, but when he died, he became something more.
Mm-hmm.
So she did this research without her counterpart, Steve. So it actually added to the research, I feel.
Yeah.
Because he was surprised. He's like, oh, really? Okay, cool. And she says, she's like, no, I was raised Catholic, so we can call it by its Native American name, but I think it's a demon. So she says, because there's so much Native American, there's so much there's a presence of Native Americans here. I would suggest that you locate the local shaman for whatever Native American tribe is in this area, which would have been the Seneca Iroquois. And she's like, have them come do whatever it is that they do. But then afterward, call the priest and have them do an exorcism on the house, just as an extra. So they actually gave advice then to Jodi and Steve. Or not Steve, to her husband. Now, Steve then did research on the Plum Tree Massacre because, he had learned about the land. So he learned about the former owners of the property as well. So in the show, you get a little background on the Plum Tree Massacre, which I've already gone over. But the research on the house I thought was kind of cool. Also kind of horrifying. So,
oh yeah, I forgot about
yeah,
this.
he learned that the Lord family owned this house for about 80 years. Many of the family members that owned the house died in unexpected ways in the house. One sister just fell over one day dead, like just done.
Yeah.
And they couldn't figure out what happened, but basically by today's standards, it'd be a stroke or a hemorrhage. That's all I could imagine. And then 10 years later, pretty much on the dot, her sister dies of the same thing in the same room, like just bloop, dead. What's spooky and really creepy was that Amy noted a sickness like in the house, and she was in just a room where the people had died. So again, this is before she starts any of the research. And she even sees a woman climbing up the wall and then disappearing, like into
into the floor above them.
Yeah, like, oh, I'm sorry. No. And she saw all that the same night that she was talking to the entities, and it was recorded. So again, like to me, like, oh, it just gives me chills. She couldn't really figure out how they were connected to Native Americans, but she did state that the one female entity that crawled up and disappeared had a pain, and her pain was still there in the house in a physical way. So whatever this entity was, like, it's just there, and it's like a lost soul almost. But anyway, since the Dead Files, Jodi has said that she could no longer see the entities, but she could still sense them. She could still hear them. All she could really hear them saying, though, was her name. And she often heard, "Help me." Like, if that's the little children asking for help,
Yeah.
Or it's the demon trying to get back in.
Yeah.
So, regardless, she did listen to Amy and Steve, and she brought in a Native American shaman, but it didn't stop the activity. It did slow it down a bit, she said. However, since the show, churches have offered to help. She was most happy with the suggestions she got from others. She learned that forces like this feed on negative energy, so she made many positive changes in her life. She kept a positive mindset. This did slow down the paranormal activity substantially, as she would no longer be this victim for them to feed off of. But according to Sabrina, as we already know, she has since moved from the home. So, that was it for her.
Yeah.
And I understand, like, if an exorcism doesn't work, we couldn't have stayed here. So I understand.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I understand what she was going through. Anything that I missed that we should add in there?
No, that's it.
Thank you. I try. Yeah. So my question is, do you think it's haunted?
Yeah, I believe that story. I do.
She was very compelling in the TV show. Like, I want to just give her a hug the whole time. Like,
I do want to watch more Dead Files now, too.
Well, let's go. Tomorrow is going to be an easy day for us, so we might as well be up late tonight. Now, I do want to say to our listeners out there, because this will be posted on October 8th-ish, 9th-ish. Okay. So, 8th. The following Sunday, the 15th.
October 9th.
Close enough. We're taking off that weekend because we're going with our friends to the Pennsylvania Renaissance Fair. Woo! So I have chosen, as the leader of this podcast, that we are taking the week off so we can enjoy just time with our friends. I haven't seen my friend Ashley in quite a while. I just want...
You might know Ashley from the Games Overboard Splendor episode. If you're not, even if you don't like board games, go to Games Overboard and listen to our Splendor episode.
Just birds.
Just the first 6 minutes is all you need.
It's true. Jackie, if you have not done that yet, I know that you will really appreciate it. So when you're sitting still in traffic, please get on your phone and look up Games Overboard and look up the Splendor episode.
It's like a half hour long, and we keep bringing it up throughout the whole episode. But the first 6 minutes are really where it's at.
I was attacked by birds, and it was horrifying. We have video footage. Stop it. I hate that sound. Anyway. So, in any case, we're taking a week off. Then we'll be back the following week for our 1-year anniversary episode of the podcast, which is crazy. Anything else you want to add?
No.
I do want to say we're close to 10,000 listens just for my podcast alone.
I know.
And I have a really cool sign that I already bought to put into another giveaway. So when we get up there to we're pretty close now, but when we get at 10K for just
specifically Wellhouse,
we're going to run a giveaway just for Wellhouse. I've already decided. Kicking
absolutely.
Games Overboard out. This is me. So in any case, enjoy your week, all of my listeners. And don't forget, think spooky thoughts. If the white man wants to live in peace with the Indian, he can live in peace. Treat all men alike. Give them all the same law. Give them all an even chance to live and grow. All men were made by the same great spirit chief. They are all brothers. The earth is the mother of all people, and all people should have equal rights upon it. White Elk.